America is the richest and most powerful country in history. But its rise to #1 was completely unexpected.
In fact, for over 100 years after its discovery, most of North America was simply ignored by the world powers.
It started with Columbus. He wanted a shortcut to India for spices, so he decided to sail west to reach the east.
He didn't find India. He found the Caribbean. But he was so sure, he called the locals Indians. He didn't bring back pepper or cinnamon. He brought back gold. And suddenly, Spain was very interested.
Spain and Portugal split the world in half. Spain got the Americas, Portugal got Africa and the route to Asia.
Spain got busy conquering the south, extracting mountains of gold and silver. They became filthy rich.
They checked North America too, found no gold, and basically said, "This place is useless."
The English were late to the party. They waited nearly a century before trying to set up their own colonies.
Their first try at Roanoke failed mysteriously. The entire colony just disappeared without a trace.
They tried again at Jamestown in 1607. This time, thanks to tobacco, they actually survived.
Then came the Pilgrims, strict Christians who hated fun but loved religious freedom for themselves.
Soon, the East Coast was crawling with British colonies. 13 of them, to be exact. Meanwhile, the French quietly claimed the entire middle of the continent, focusing on fur trading, not farming. In 1754, they clashed over who owned the land. It sparked the French and Indian War.
Both sides teamed up with Native American tribes. It was a messy, global fight for control.
Britain won decisively. France was kicked out of North America completely. Britain now owned everything east of the Mississippi.
But winning wasn't cheap. Britain was broke and needed money fast to pay for the war.
So they turned to the colonies and said, "We protected you, now pay your taxes." The colonists were not amused. Why should we pay taxes if we don't get a vote in Parliament?
Tensions rose. In Boston, they dumped British tea into the harbor. The king was furious. Protests turned into shootouts. The Revolutionary War had begun. David versus Goliath.
On July 4th, 1776, they signed the Declaration of Independence. No longer colonies, but states.
Against all odds, and with help from the French, the Americans defeated the British Empire in 1781. Freedom was great, but their first government was a disaster. The states acted like 13 separate countries.
They needed a fix. In 1787, they wrote the Constitution, creating a strong federal government that actually worked.
George Washington became the first president. The United States of America was officially in business.
But the U.S. was still small. The West belonged to Spain, and later returned to France.
Over in Europe, Napoleon needed cash for his wars. He had a giant piece of land in America he couldn't defend.
In 1803, Jefferson bought the Louisiana Territory for just $15 million.
Just like that, the USA doubled in size overnight. The greatest real estate deal in history.
The population was exploding. American families were huge, and they needed space.
Of course, the land wasn't empty. Native Americans were pushed aside as the frontier expanded. Millions of Americans packed their bags and started moving west to claim empty land. In 1819, the U.S. bought Florida from Spain. The map was starting to look more familiar. Meanwhile, Mexico won its independence from Spain. The U.S. had a new neighbor. Mexico invited Americans to settle in Texas. Bad move. Soon, the Americans outnumbered the Mexicans. The Texans rebelled. fought a war and declared independence. They were their own country for 9 years.
In 1845, the U.S. annexed Texas. Mexico was furious. This meant war.
The Mexican-American War was short and brutal. The U.S. military was superior and marched all the way to Mexico City.
Mexico surrendered half its territory. The U.S. paid $15 million and took the entire Southwest. Now, the United States stretched from sea to shining sea. The manifest destiny was complete.
Timing is everything. Immediately after taking California, gold was discovered. The gold rush was on.
Hundreds of thousands of people flooded into California, transforming the Wild West overnight.
Up north, the U.S. and Britain agreed to split the Oregon Territory peacefully. The modern borders were set.
A few years later, the U.S. bought a tiny strip of land for a railroad. The continental map was finished.
America was big and rich, but a dark shadow was growing. The North and South were drifting apart.
The North banned slavery. The South's economy depended on it. It was a ticking time bomb. In 1860, Abraham Lincoln was elected. The South panicked, fearing he would ban slavery, and decided to leave. 11 states seceded to form the Confederacy. The United States was no longer united. It was the Civil War. Brother fought brother in the deadliest conflict in American history. For 4 years, the war raged. It was bloody, messy, and defined the soul of the nation.
Lincoln changed the war's purpose. It wasn't just about unity, it was about freedom. Slavery was abolished.
The North won. The Union was saved. But the country had to rebuild from the ashes.
In 1867, Russia sold Alaska to the U.S. People called it a frozen wasteland. They were wrong.
It cost $7 million. Critics laughed until they found gold and oil later on.
The U.S. also claims tiny islands for bird poop. Guano was a valuable fertilizer back then.
Post-war America industrialized fast. Factories, railroads, and cities grew at an unstoppable pace.
Having conquered the continent, America started looking overseas. The age of imperialism began.
In Hawaii, American businessmen overthrew the Queen to protect their fruit and sugar plantations.
Despite some hesitation, the U.S. annexed Hawaii in 1898. It was a perfect naval base. Down in Cuba, locals were fighting for independence from Spain. American newspapers hyped up the conflict.
The Spanish-American War was on. It was a blowout. Spain's empire crumbled in months.
Then, an American warship exploded in Havana. It was an accident, but the U.S. blamed Spain.
We freed the Philippines from Spain, only to fight a brutal war to keep them under control.
The U.S. took Puerto Rico, Guam, and the Philippines. America was now a colonial empire. The U.S. Navy needed a shortcut between oceans. Sailing around South America took too long.
The new Panama gave the U.S. the rights to build the canal. It was an engineering marvel.
Now, the U.S. Navy could dominate both the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans easily. Roosevelt sent the Great White Fleet around the world just to show off American power. By the early 20th century, America's economy was larger than Britain, Germany, or France.
American innovation was peaking. The Wright brothers took to the skies in 1903.
Henry Ford revolutionized the assembly line. America was putting the world on wheels.
Millions of immigrants flocked to the land of opportunity to build a new life.
They fueled the factories and filled the cities. America was a true melting pot.
While America grew rich, Europe was a mess of alliances waiting to explode. America's policy was isolationism. Let Europe fight its own wars, they said. In 1914, World War I began. The old empires of Europe started destroying each other.
At first, America stayed neutral, happy to sell weapons and food to the Allies. But German submarines started sinking ships, including the Lusitania. Americans were outraged.
Then Germany tried to get Mexico to attack the US. That was the last straw.
The sleeping giant awoke. In 1917, America joined the fight.
Fresh American troops and endless supplies turned the tide of the war.
The Allies won. America had proved it was a military superpower.
Europe was devastated. The US emerged as the strongest economy on Earth.
In just a few centuries, a few colonies became a global titan.
With perfect geography, vast resources, and 2 oceans for protection.
A mix of hard work, ruthless expansion, and incredible luck.
But the rise to power came at a terrible cost to Native Americans and enslaved people. Today, American culture is everywhere. It's the main character of the 20th century. Its military is unrivaled, guarding trade routes and projecting power.
Its economy remains the engine of the world, driving innovation.
But history isn't over. New challenges face the nation from within and without.
From the frontier of the West to the final frontier of space.
That was 423 years of history. What will the next 100 years look like?